In a mere 5 minutes, Supreme Court Chief Justice John Roberts sought to silence Caroline Leavitt, White House press secretary, with a $50,000 fine, issued without evidence, arguments, or due process. A blatant abuse of judicial power. Unprepared for the fierce resistance that followed, Roberts faced a moment that would corner him. What was intended as a routine hearing at the federal courthouse on Constitution Avenue in Washington, D.C., exploded into a gripping showdown between political ambition and unyielding truth. Leavitt, armed with sharp intellect and steadfast loyalty to President Trump, shook the judicial system to its core. On that cold, grey morning, as she entered the courtroom, Leavitt sensed a staged atmosphere, the silence too heavy, court staff avoiding her gaze, the walls themselves seeming to watch. Roberts, already seated, exuded authority, known for strategic rulings prioritizing order over debate. His cold eyes tracked Leavitt, viewing her not as a White House official, but as an obstacle to eliminate. The air wasn't just tense, it was orchestrated, with Roberts there not to deliver justice, but to assert dominance. His presence drained the room of oxygen as he adjusted his robe and stared ahead, emotionless. Without preamble, he declared, "Lower court, the matter is clear. The defendant violated the Federal Communications Act, Section 204. A $50,000 fine is imposed immediately." No explanation, no process, just a blunt ruling, as if the case had been decided long before. Leavitt's documents remained unopened, her hands slightly clenched but controlled. Federal prosecutor Michael Harper shifted uncomfortably, sensing something amiss, but there was nothing to miss. No arguments, no evidence, just a cold, final decree. It was a legal execution, and Leavitt was expected to bow and leave defeated. But she didn't. Carefully, she rose, seeking clarity. "Your Honor, we haven't begun. I haven't presented arguments." Robert's eyes narrowed in irritation, snapping. "Unnecessary. You violated the law. There's nothing to discuss." His icy tone aimed to humiliate, a calculated message to silence her. Yet Leavitt stood firm, her restraint honed from years facing media and political pressure alongside Trump. She knew that in a courtroom where power was abused, composure was her sharpest weapon. With resolve, she stated, "Your Honor, I formally request to present my defense. Free speech and due process demand I be heard." Her firm voice carried moral weight, asserting an inviolable right, but Roberts, unyielding, leaned forward, his words sharp with contempt. "Miss Leavitt, this is not your stage. This is my courtroom, and I won't tolerate speeches." It was punishment disguised as procedure, a warning to all. The courtroom became a stage for intimidation, but Leavitt refused to budge, her mind racing. This wasn't a legal proceeding, but a scripted power play, with Roberts using the bench as a throne to silence her and make an example for White House staff, reporters, and Trump supporters. She felt the shift. The case was no longer about a media law violation, but about her presence, her refusal to yield. In that hostile silence, Leavitt found clarity. Roberts never intended a fair hearing. She stood taller, her voice quieter but stronger. "Very well, we'll proceed on the record. Every word, every step. If the law doesn't protect me, the truth will. Every injustice needs a witness." Caroline Leavitt's clarity became her weapon, more dangerous to Chief Justice John Roberts than any outburst. She wasn't being fined for a media law violation, but targeted for her role as Trump's unyielding spokesperson. The courtroom was orchestrated to declare her irrelevant, but Leavitt held the truth and public opinion. Pulling documents from her briefcase, she shifted the room's atmosphere from reverence to anticipation. Each page was meticulously prepared, like parts of a machine only she could operate. "Your Honor," she said, her voice calm but sharp, "we'll discuss precedent, because what you're doing has been rejected." She held up Citizens United v. FEC 2010. An organization was accused of violating campaign finance laws for political speech, with no documents or verified reports, just vague allegations. The Supreme Court ruled that restricting free speech was unconstitutional, overturning the charges. She paused, letting the words resonate, then cited Texas v. Johnson 1989. An individual was fined for political expression, based solely on authorities' opinions. The court ruled it violated the First Amendment, upheld at every level. Her eyes locked on Roberts, who shifted subtly, his jaw tightening. Stenographer Emily Carter typed urgently. Prosecutor Michael Harper leaned forward, now a spectator. Leavitt pressed on. You're fining me $50,000 without evidence, arguments, or a hearing, just your pronouncement. That's not justice. It's power disguised as justice. Reporters exchanged glances, stunned by her boldness. Tapping her documents, she continued. These cases are binding reminders of this courtroom's purpose. Ignoring process, silencing defense, and ruling without evidence isn't interpreting the law, it's violating it. I won't let that happen silently. Her voice dropped to a resonant whisper. You may ignore my arguments, but you cannot erase precedent or rewrite the Constitution from that bench. Robert's eyes faltered, his fingers tapping unevenly, his control cracking. Leavitt's precision, citing Supreme Court rulings, scared him more than defiance. She exposed his rulings as mockery. His voice now edged, called a 15-minute recess, and escaped cloaked in decorum. As he vanished into chambers, Leavitt stood unshaken, her documents like live ammunition. The room froze, doubt creeping into Robert's authority. She knew this wasn't reflection, but a tactical retreat to salvage his position. When he returned, he wasn't alone. Judge Samuel Coleman, a seasoned federal overseer, joined him, his presence signaling Roberts' unraveling control. Roberts, voice subdued, said Coleman would observe for procedural guidance, but it was clear. He needed gravitas to counter Leavitt's precision. Coleman's sharp gaze assessed Leavitt, not with hostility, but as a test. She met it, chin raised, unyielding. This was no longer a courtroom, but a battlefield between entrenched power and reform. Coleman spoke with force. Miss Leavitt, restate your core argument for the record. It was an audit, and she knew one misstep could collapse everything, but one right word could command the room. Without hesitation, she responded, Yes, Your Honor. I'll begin with violations of due process, supported by Supreme Court precedent. Her voice declared a shift in power, tilting the courtroom toward her as Roberts sat, outmaneuvered, his authority waning before Coleman's measured scrutiny and Leavitt's unrelenting truth. The courtroom's tense silence enveloped Caroline Leavitt as she stood at the defense table, hands resting on her document folder. When investigator Andrew Baxter was called to the stand, his rigid confidence and gleaming FCC badge suggested an unchallenged veteran. Leavitt watched him with surgical precision, noting his refusal to meet her gaze. After taking the oath, Baxter sat, expecting an easy outcome. Leavitt approached slowly, her steps deliberate, letting the weight of her presence settle. Mr. Baxter, she began calmly. You filed the complaint leading to my fine, correct? He nodded. That's correct, ma'am. Too comfortably. You observed the violation, she pressed. Did you take photographs? Baxter shook his head. No, ma'am. Wasn't necessary. The room chilled. A detailed report, diagrams, witness statements, or footage. None needed, he shrugged, his tone edging into defensiveness. Was anyone else present? I was alone, he admitted. Leavitt paused, turning to the gallery and bench, her words precise. So a $50,000 fine based solely on your personal judgment, with no photographs, report, or verification. Baxter, irritated, confirmed. I've been doing this for 20 years. I know a violation when I see it. His arrogance surfaced, believing experience equaled immunity. Leavitt's faint smile was calculated. We're not here for your feelings, Mr. Baxter, but evidence. She stepped closer. Do you believe your opinion, without evidence, overrides a citizen's right to a fair hearing? Baxter faltered. My experience allows sound judgments. Judgments, Leavitt echoed. Turning to the bench, Your Honors, this isn't law enforcement. It's assumption, not process but imposition. Mr. Baxter interpreted an action as law. She faced him. Any verifiable evidence in the record? No, ma'am, he said quietly. Leavitt let the silence speak, then sharpened her tone. This investigator admitted his complaint rests on subjective judgment, not probable cause, just a feeling. Judge Samuel Coleman leaned forward, his silence no longer neutral. Leavitt continued, If a fine without evidence stands, every citizen risks financial ruin from arbitrary rulings. What Mr. Baxter calls enforcement, the Constitution calls tyranny. She scanned the gallery, awakening reporters to the system's imbalance. Her final question to Baxter, What evidence would you present to defend your decision? He hesitated. I acted within my training. Leavitt's voice cut like glass. A $50,000 fine based on one man's recollection. No oversight. What you call a complaint is your opinion in a suit. The silence was electric, the prosecution's case hollow. Coleman's pensive gaze and Robert's pursed lips confirmed the shift. Leavitt stepped back, her message clear. Punishment without evidence was indefensible. Turning to the bench, she rested her hands on her documents, now a loaded weapon. Your Honors, you've seen the failure of process, but this isn't just paperwork. It's about people crushed by invisible power. She held up a page. James Carter, a boys veteran, lost his auto shock to a clerical error. Maria Delgado, a rally electrician, saw her career erased by vague licensing rules. William Hayes, an Arizona retiree, was fined $12,000 for a fence crossing a boundary by 43 centimeters. These were scars of a predatory system. Leavitt faced Coleman. This isn't just my hearing. It's about unchecked power destroying lives without proof. Caroline Leavitt's voice grew steely as she addressed the courtroom, her documents exposing systemic injustice. James Carter lost his shop and honed to a bureaucratic error, offered only an unsigned email apology. Maria Delgado's career was erased by unexplained licensing changes, forcing her to start over. William Hayes tore down his fence under duress, only to be fined again for posts left in the ground. The gallery sat still, Robert's pen idle, as Leavitt's stories revealed a predatory system. Let's stop pretending this is just about a fine, she urged Coleman and Roberts. What happened to them, and nearly to me, wasn't a glitch but unchecked power, a system that ruins lives without evidence. Raising her palm, she continued, No documents, no witnesses, just an investigator's opinion, rubber-stamped by this court. If I hadn't brought these documents, hadn't known my rights, I'd have paid the fine, thinking I was wrong. That's how injustice survives, masked as procedure, waiting for no challenge. Her voice, low but ironclad, struck the room. Unchecked power isn't justice. It's a loaded gun in the hands of those forgetting who they serve. Power that answers to no one hunts people until no one stands in its way. The silence was suffocating, her words leaving the courtroom on a precipice. Roberts, lips rigid, twitched his fingers, clinging to fading authority. He spoke, voice hollow. This court retains discretionary authority, not bound by every forceful argument. We ensure compliance, and that's not up for debate. It was a desperate bid to reclaim power, rooted in ego, not law. Leavitt let his words hang, then stepped forward, her voice a blade. Discretionary authority isn't judicial supremacy. Your power exists within the law's boundaries. Discretion isn't a shield for error or a sword for bias. It's a tool, never replacing evidence or truth. She faced the gallery. This $50,000 fine, based on an unverified claim, isn't enforcement. It's lawlessness in a judicial robe. Roberts tensed, poised to retort, but Coleman interjected. I've heard enough. Miss Leavitt is correct. Discretionary authority cannot override constitutional standards or substitute truth with assumption. His words hit like a hammer, collapsing Roberts' argument. No documents, no witnesses, no evidence justify this fine. An investigator's unverified statement, doesn't meet enforcement thresholds. Upholding this sets a precedent for unchecked power, not justice. Roberts sat motionless, hands clasped, his authority dismantled. After an unbearable silence, he spoke, voice strained. This court finds insufficient evidence to sustain the fine. The fine is vacated, the charge dismissed. It was no victory, but a defeat, an admission of overreach. Leavitt stood calm, as if the dismissal was inevitable, not because the system worked, but because she forced it to. The gallery, stunned, and Harper, silent, understood. Leavitt exposed systemic rust. She tore down walls of prestige and reputation with truth and the Constitution. Roberts, once absolute, sat outmaneuvered. The courtroom stillness was profound, the hum of lights pausing in reverence. Roberts' power had evaporated before Leavitt's relentless demand for due process. As he met her gaze, he whispered, "I underestimated you." Leavitt's subtle smile replied, "You're not the first, Your Honor," her calm defiance echoing. The room shifted irreversibly, justice demanding accountability, not just authority, birthing a precedent beyond those walls. Caroline Leavitt's victory was no mere dismissal, but a transformation of justice, echoing beyond the federal courthouse. As she walked down the marble aisle, her heels clicking like a revolution's pulse, the gallery watched in awe, realizing they'd witnessed a systemic shift. Her steps testified to hours of preparation and courage against injustice's weight. The daylight through the courthouse doors symbolized transparency piercing corruption's fog. Pausing, Leavitt glanced back at Roberts' defeated visage, the room affirming the law as a shield, not oppression. Stepping outside, bathed in forgiving light, she carried a complex victory, not celebrated with cheers, but etched as a precedent shaping future cases. Her fight exposed systemic injustice, rooted in unchecked authority silencing the marginalized. Every detail, Roberts' cold tone, the tense air, the gallery's held breath, sparked a movement. Judges might now hesitate before evidence-less rulings, prosecutors face precedent challenges, and citizens find hope in her defiance. Leavitt's legacy wasn't just personal, it reclaimed dignity eroded by bias. Weeks later, her case rippled nationwide, with federal officers facing demands to review arbitrary fines. In a Midwestern city, an attorney uncovered hundreds of similar complaints, forcing officials from Des Moines to Atlanta to expose secretive practices. Thousands of citizens, ruined by evidence-less fines, fueled public outrage, shifting the narrative to a reckoning with administrative overreach. Leavitt's meticulously argued case became a turning point, cited by scholars and activists. Cities vacated hundreds of fines, and officials faced the truth. A system relying on opinion over truth was dangerous. Community protests demanded evidence-based enforcement, amplifying once powerless voices. Media, from *60 Minutes* to X, highlighted reforms, revealing tens of thousands of wrongful fines over a decade, galvanizing public pressure for change. Leavitt's victory laid a cornerstone in American justice, exposing unchecked power's dangers and igniting a movement for transparency. Legal experts hailed her case as historic, taught in law schools, discussed at conferences, and cited for policy overhauls. Communities found voice, with vacated fines and revised policies shaping a fairer system. Her legacy wasn't in glory, but in citizens freed from arbitrary punishment. A beacon for generations that power, when challenged, becomes a force for good. Leavitt altered history, her courage inspiring scrutiny of a tainted system, ensuring penalties are evidence-based. Her story rallied the powerless, proving that demanding evidence and standing firm can reshape a nation. Today, her fight reflects American struggles with administrative overreach. Her lesson: question decisions, demand evidence, and unite for change. By researching rights, joining forums, and sharing stories like James Carter's and Maria Delgado's, citizens can drive reform. Leavitt's legacy movement on social media shows community power, urging all to stay resolute, seek truth, and build a fairer America. Her quiet departure began a chapter where rulings are scrutinized, fines justified, and justice earned through courage, not dispensed by whim, leaving an indelible mark on those who believe the law serves the people.